So greetings from the bowels of London Learning Commons. Just a quick video here, and I promise this one will actually be quick, to sort of contextualize what we're doing here in week number 3 of English 218, Writing in the Sciences. So you can probably start to see the logical progression of things, how the arc of this course is sort of going. We spent the first couple of weeks really practicing how to read and understand scientific information, especially information that is disseminated through scientific journals. So being able to read studies and read articles and get a sense for what the major story arc is and what is happening in that article in terms of what did we already know, what did this particular study or research try to uncover, and then what does it mean. So now that we feel pretty comfortable, hopefully, reading those types of articles, we need to take the next step, which is to summarize them and to ultimately find them also, to be able to do research and to find high-quality information. So relative to summarizing, as you work on summarizing and as I read your revised summaries of the first article that we read, in week number 1, there's a few things that I want to draw your attention to that I think are really important. One, summary should always be brief. The purpose of summarizing, obviously, is to articulate information in a more compact fashion. And that can be difficult because we want our summaries, generally speaking, to be pretty inclusive, to include a lot of the information that's presented in an article. But a lot of times we don't really need it to be exhaustive, meaning it doesn't need to cover everything. And what that really boils down to is that it needs to be audience-centered. And so we need to really think about how our audience is likely to use the summary. Are they going to use the summary to make decisions about their future actions or the way that they do their business? Are they going to use the summary to try to conduct a similar study? If so, then obviously we're going to make different decisions. In this case, I'm not asking that you write to a fellow researcher or an expert, so they're probably not going to use that information to recreate a study. Therefore, we don't necessarily need to get bogged down in things like methodology or how they contextualize their results in terms of statistical significance and those types of things. So it's really trying to think carefully about what your reader needs to know. The reason that we do this assignment in this class is because so many of you are going into nursing, and one of the competencies in the nursing program is a writing competency, and one of the assignments or multiple of the writing assignments that you do in that curriculum is really about being able to read and then re-articulate information from a scholarly journal about best practices in nursing. So this really comes from there, and it's really preparation for that particular type of writing. But it's just a great skill in general to be able to read something that's relatively dense and complicated and to be able to boil it down, distill it down into its important elements, and to communicate that clearly, especially since these types of articles and these types of studies really do help us make decisions about how we're going to carry out our work, regardless of what work that is, whether that's growing the best grass as a turf grass manager, whether that's taking care of horses as a veterinarian, or whether that's treating human beings. So it runs the whole gamut. The other thing about summaries is that they should be unbiased. So that doesn't mean you shouldn't analyze them and critique them, but if you're presenting something as a summary generally doesn't include your editorial comments yet. It's generally just a snapshot, true to life, of the article and what it's saying. So I would like in your summaries to remain relatively unbiased. However, you'll notice that as part of your summary analysis assignment, there is an analytical component. And I realize that we're not experts in these particular research methodologies, and we're not PhD holding scientists. So that's really not what I'm after here. But what I am after is for you just to ask critical questions. And that's really what it boils down to. What questions does this research raise? Are there any potential limitations to it? Did they study a particular population and leave out another population? Was their sample size potentially too small? Do you see any problems even with your knowledge of the methodology? Is there any potential bias that you can identify? What do you think the next steps are? So usually, always, a piece of research only kind of takes a small bite out of the pie, and usually there's a lot more work to be done to make that knowledge more generalizable and more encompassing. And so, what do you think the next steps for the research are? So, you have a reading about this week that I think is very helpful. Again, it's written for an audience of physicians, but I think it's really written from a practitioner's point of view. So I think that's helpful. But I really just want you to ask intelligent questions about the article, and that's what I mean by analysis. And so I think that would be very helpful. And then finally this week, so we're trying to get our feet under us as we work on writing good summaries and being critical when we read scientific literature. Just because the key here is just because somebody has a PhD doesn't mean that their research is necessarily gospel, doesn't mean that it's valid. In fact, one of the best known examples of this is the article by a researcher, I believe named Wakefield, who published a research article that basically made a very strong connection between vaccinations and autism, and that's actually sort of where this anti-vax movement largely originates. And it turns out that the guy just made up a lot of the data. What we have to realize is that these researchers are under tremendous pressure to publish their work and to come up with findings. And what we're learning over time, and we'll read about this later in the semester, is that sometimes there's a bias just in that reality, that sort of economic reality, that folks tend to publish when they've been successful or when they've found something useful, but they tend to not publish when they find inconclusive results. And so a lot of that gets sort of put on the cutting room floor, if you will, to use a film metaphor. And so we just have to be very skeptical. And I think that that's just a very valuable skill as a reader and consumer of scientific information, that we ask key questions. And we'll be looking at that a lot through the semester. So keep those tips in mind as you're summarizing and as you're analyzing. And then the second part of this week is really about being able to find high quality information. And I made 3 videos. They're as concise as I possibly could make them. But I think that another part of this class is really about helping you practice your information literacy skills and being able to find high quality information that relates to a particular topic, since you are going to be, most of you, held accountable, well, all of us are held accountable to best practices regardless of what we do. Believe it or not, the social science of teaching research follows all of these same principles, that folks are out there researching about the best practices for teaching and how to achieve the best results with a wide array, in a wide array of contexts, and people publish these results, and their methodologies are a little bit different. They're typically not typical experimental study styles, but there are very regimented and very particular research methodologies that people use to study teaching, and they publish their results in journals all the same. So we're all sort of beholden to best practices, or at least we should be, and so we need to be able to read them and understand them and then apply them to our lives. And so that's really what this is about. So I hope that you find those videos useful. If you have any trouble with any of the research stuff, or you're having trouble thinking of a topic, or if you're having trouble finding information, or the library databases are giving you a hard time, please feel free to reach out to me, because I do think this is a great opportunity for us to really hone our research skills. I can tell you that I've basically taught you now everything I know about research, and I think that I'm pretty skilled at finding stuff. So if you absorb what I'm putting down, I think you'll be in a really good spot, more or less, because you'll be able to find stuff about virtually any topic. And again, I say this in one of my videos, but I use this stuff all the time for my personal life too. If I have a question, just the other day, actually, my dog ate an ant trap that was flavored like peanut butter, and sure enough, I could poke stuff into Google all I wanted, and I was getting, Uncle Merle on Yahoo Answers, which was not helpful, or somebody who purported to be a veterinarian, not helpful, or a poison control expert, not helpful. So my wife and I were doing some internet research, and sure enough, we started to limit our search to the places that we knew were fairly reliable, and we got answers that we needed. So this stuff is very helpful, and it can help you solve immediate problems and help you address some of those more enduring scientific questions. So that's what we're up against. I hope you see the progression or the arc of the class. So we'll work on these summary analysis papers. I know that they're not the most exciting thing in the world, but it's an important skill. And then we're going to totally change our audience and our purpose, and we're going to start writing for a more general audience, which is really fun because we get to educate people about topics that are near and dear to our heart. So that's what we're up against, and I look forward to working with you in week 3.